Oh, here we are.
Hey guys, welcome. Welcome to the month of April. Time is flying.
Yeah, here we are for another episode of All Things Recon.
Josh, what is this? 17? What episode is this? 17?
It says 17. I think we've actually
Holy
had,
crap.
maybe 6 or 7, shadow episodes in the beginning that aren't haven't been documented quite as well. But here
Gotcha.
we are,
All right.
and
Well, we'd like
we're
to
actually
thank everybody for
returning to
coming
this
out.
topic. Oh, sorry, Bobby, didn't mean to interrupt.
Returning to this topic, yeah, I just wanted to thank appreciate all the support and hearing some feedback of the generated interest in our podcast is definitely recon will never be out of style, right? It's such a huge part. It's such a huge redheaded stepchild part of every dealership's operation, right? And it deserves the resources that dealerships have been put towards trying to do well with their recon process. So
People have really, I think, started coming around though. I think you've made note of that as well, Bobby. It's no longer quite the redheaded stepchild that it was before. I think a lot of people are starting to understand the value in really investing your time and understanding of that process overall.
Yeah, Josh, and before we get into the nuts of it though, but back, when we first started, when me and you were traveling the country, right, installing recon tools in dealerships, recon tools were even a scarcity, so to speak, right? Oh, we need a tool for that. No, I'd rather run around the dealership with like a chicken with my head cut off, right?
Yeah,
And then on top of that, then it came dedicated teams. Do you have used car technicians? And a dedicated writer and a recon, like we call a velocity manager or a recon champion, right? So I think more and more, and then especially through COVID, dealerships are really on board with doing recon well. So
absolutely. COVID definitely impacted that for sure.
yeah, yeah. But with that said, Josh, go ahead and lead us into the theme of this podcast.
Yeah, so we're returning to the topic of the trade walk. I think this is something that we covered way in the beginning. I think this is maybe our first episode topic was about the trade walk and how important it was to the process. And I think we sort of picked it out of a hat essentially because there were so many aspects of recon that we could have talked about, but we just wanted to start with this, and we got some great feedback from the audience at that time. And I just want to reiterate to those who are participating here. I can see you're in the meeting with us. Our audience members, at any point in time, you can raise up your hand and you can join the conversation. So we'd really appreciate your perspective as well. But today's topic is the trade walk, and it's really about the first steps that the first few feet that that vehicle drives in your dealership. Where is it staged, and what do we do from it with it when we first take it into our process? What does that intake look like? What are we evaluating about the car? What are we trying to structure in terms of our communication? And then how does that help everybody downstream of the process?
And Josh, when we're talking about trade walk, the trade walk also refers to a part of your salespeople's process for taking in the trade with the customer, right? Take the customer out to the car, you do a walk around on their vehicle. You know, what you're doing is you're professionally devaluing their trade, right? But what we're really trying to get to with this, when we say trade walk, it's walking the trades that came in from the night before as a team.
Mm,
So you got a combination of your dealership, used car managers, right? Walking the cars with probably your internal writer, maybe some of your internal technicians, if you guys have dedicated technicians, and maybe some vendors. Like quite often vendors participate. You know, these guys make a lot of money off of dealerships, right? So yeah, hang out on a trade walk, which what we're referring to is the hey, we took in 15 trades. Here it is Monday morning. We got all the trades from the weekend, right? We might have 15, 20 cars here. Let's walk through these cars and come up with at least a preliminary plan of what we plan to do with these cars. So that's
yeah.
what we're really kind of referring to when it comes to trade walk.
Yeah. And some of the best used car operations in the country have trade walks, and they take their salespeople out on that trade walk along with the internal writer, along with those internal technicians, along with the vendors, and everybody takes part in that initial evaluation of these fresh units. And the purpose is not only to help those units along in the process, but also to familiarize your team with their inventory. And I think, Bobby, you had a lot to say on that point
Ah,
as
man,
well.
let's just be transparent, right? Help get the salespeople involved just as much as service, right? I know there's a lot from being, especially from the recon side, that we're going to talk about establishing, what the plan is for this car. Are we going to do the wheel repair? Are we going to paint the bumper? Is what bucket car are we taking this in as? A, B, C car, or is it going to be, are we not going to paint the bumper because it's got 100,000 miles on it, but it's a good piece, and we're going to safety only, right? This is good information to establish up front, because guess what? You don't have to communicate later, right? If the car makes it through the shop and you're going to keep it, then why not have already established the communication of the trajectory of that car when it comes out the other end of the service department, right? And then, your internal advisor or your recon manager has to kind of juggle some vendors or redirect that car according to the plan. It shouldn't be then, after it's already been in recon for 3 days, 4 days, to discuss, hey, what do you think? What do you want to do to this car? Right.
Yeah, exactly. And Bobby, you're hitting on something that's really important. This is why, if I say if you're not doing this trade walk with the full blown trade walk with the salespeople involved, which of course we're going to talk about the benefits of having the sales involved in that initial intake process, and having them understand thoroughly what the recon process looks like, because there's huge benefits to your sales team to be able to understand that process. But what Bobby's touching on is really critically important, is just having that intake, that thorough intake process in the first place, where you establish clearly not only what you expect for the car in terms of what the inspection in the shop's going to look like, but also what you're willing to invest in terms of the cosmetic recon, the interior repair, those sorts of decisions as well. Because, like you're saying, Bobby, we've already spent some time with the unit in the shop, and we can't. Uh, it's not effective or efficient for us to then make the decision about what's next for that car only once it's out of the shop. We can structure the whole plan so that everything just flows naturally. There doesn't have to be a conversation every time. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, or last month, I should say, about standardizing your process. So these
Yeah.
two things go hand in hand. Having a standardized process, and then having that intake process that happens every time for every car, so that you can establish, according to your standard process, what does this car need, and then just from that point forward, it just falls very easily down that process, down that pipeline, until it hits your front line.
Hey,
And
and before we go further, Josh, I want to let our audience know, please raise your hand if you guys got any feedback or input or questions. Remember, me and Josh are on a team that we talk to thousands of dealerships across, North America. And, you know, so feel free. We'd love
I'm in
some feedback on
Australia
the
as well.
subject. Yeah, Puerto Rico, overseas. But one of the things that, Josh, I think you can agree, it's kind of gone to the wayside. It's a lost art. There are so many dealerships that do not do a trade walk. Now, granted, the some of the tools, the Auto tools, there's some software tools that have been doing really well with helping them price it in the market and stuff like that. But again, the science of what you're doing with your car means nothing if it's not a part of your culture, right? So that trade walk, what does it look like? You get, every morning, at least there was a dealership that I worked for that did a very good trade walk. They actually involved, like I said, like you were kind of alluding to, Josh, involve your salespeople, right? Because not only are you mapping out, and you have some of your vendors there, right? Maybe your vendor can give an opinion. Hey, can you, sales managers always love that the dent guy can push out any dent, right? But there's actually there's knowing the difference between what a dent guy can and can't do, saves you, could be the difference in what you do with the car, whether you're going to spend an extra, $2,000 at the body shop, or can the guy push it out for, $100. So, and we're not all metallurgy, professionals, and having some of your vendors right there to help you in part of the decision making process, yay or nay, or hey, this will be pretty cheap. We can just do a blend. If it's just if it's a low price point car, let's just do a blend and call it a day. So some of the decision making can really happen. And then having your salespeople there, they're taking ownership in the process, which materializes their investment in the process. And not only can they be involved, you're talking about how you're going to price the car, what you're going to put into it. You might be putting the four square on the windows, right, with the chalk, marker, and PDR, marking wheel repair. Your salespeople know as well. They know what the plan for that car is. And what not
Yeah.
better way to establish a top of the head awareness of what inventory is coming into what's coming in onto your lot. As salespeople, you can, we got 5, 6, 7 sale, whatever team A, B, or C, or whatever is on that day. They're there on the trade walk. I guarantee you, there's a car in that lineup that they have a customer for.
Right. Yeah. A- And
I know I
for
said a lot right there.
no, yeah, but
I get all fired up.
I think that goes hand in hand with what we've been talking about, where you establish a story for every vehicle that goes through your dealership. And the point being that when comes time to sit down with the customer, this is where your cars stand tall because you have a thoroughly documented, transparent reconditioning process that all of your salespeople can speak to. Now, I know that some of the people who are going to be listening to this podcast, they're in a different kind of market, and that they have a different kind of organizational structure, and they might have an inventory that doesn't necessarily suit itself to the AB C car structure necessarily. Maybe they're selling one particular type of unit, and that's pretty much what's going from their lot. Or they don't have they don't have quite the organizational capacity yet to really give their sales team the support that they need, the confidence that they need. But really, you got to dress for the job that you want, not the one that you have right now. It's something I've always emphasized with a lot of our dealers is that a lot of them will say, well, we don't have the inventory, that necessitates a recon tool. Well, one day you will, or one day you'll want to, and you won't be able to. You'll get a huge influx of cars, and they'll end up sitting on your lot for 30, 45 days, 60 days. And you'll lose, all the money on those cars because you didn't build a thorough enough process to handle that volume of cars going through. So anyway, the point being that when you treat your sales team like professionals, the professionals that they are, and you provide them with these tools and resources, you teach them how to structure the conversations with the customers. Then you can that's going to pay dividends down the line. A lot of dealers I think are a little tepid on this sort of conversation. Not a lot, but a significant portion are tepid on this conversation of involving the salespeople because they don't trust their salespeople to be able to execute on these higher level conversations with customers about the conditions of vehicles. But customers are not stupid; they're not foolish. They don't live in a fantasy world where every car is perfect. You know what I
Especially in
mean?
today's market too. They are way too educated.
Yeah,
So
they can look
do
up
it
the
right the
Kelly.
first time.
Yeah, they can
Yeah.
look up the Carfax. They can look up the Kelly Blue Book. They're aware of the value of the unit, and they're aware of how of what dealerships do when it comes to reconditioning the vehicle to some extent. When you can be transparent about that, when you can make it a culture in your sales team to leverage that narrative, because it is a narrative and it is an investment that you've already made in terms of your time and attention. If you do a good enough if you do the job well, you should present that. You should stand behind that work. You should stand behind each of your cars. You should teach your salespeople how to do that. The only way you're going to be able to do that is if you bring them along a little bit for the process. And one of the greatest ways you can do that
Mm.
is with the trade walk.
And then they can justify the number, right? Oh, hey, by the way, we did this, this, and this. Now, we can freak out a little bit because sometimes when you arm salespeople with too much information, they're not that smart with it sometimes, right? But that's, hey, you got to build that in your culture. You got to help your people understand how, having some background on the car. Or we've even discussed the conditions by who took this in on trade. I remember you got the salespeople out there. Oh, I took this in on trade. It was an old lady that owned it. It's got its own. Let's say it's a 2012 Camry with only 50,000 miles on it. Now there's a story. Now everybody knows that story. So when it comes time to the next customer who might be landing on that car, they have they have a personal investment or firsthand knowledge of just a little more than, hey, this is a car and this is the market value.
Yeah, they can attest to that story and, not only previous ownership, previous, records of the vehicle, but also what happened to it here in the dealership. What did we do to it that you don't have to do now, Mr. Customer? It's cheaper
Hmm.
for us to do it than it is for you. It represents less of a loss for us to do these repairs than it does for you, Mr. Customer. And you're going to know when you drive off this lot, you won't have to be to any repair shops or anywhere else to service your vehicle outside of the service interval. By the way, here's your, free oil change, for the first 60 days after purchase or whatever, whatever kind of voucher program, whatever kind of way you want to leverage that sales conversation into something, that can get them into your service department. But one of the best ways I think to represent the value of your service department, especially you know, from outside of the service department, is with the sales team, with the used car team, because once again, they're the ones that are emphasizing the investment that the dealership's made in the vehicle. So
Right. So
the
what
customer can
what
feel confident to bring the car back to that dealership.
yeah, so what have we established so far? So we you have your morning trade walk. You got your service team out there, your internal writer, hopefully. The used car manager who owns the inventory, so to speak, right? They're the ones really making the decision how we're going to market the car, what we're going to put into the car, what do based on what I plan for this car, how much cosmetic work needs to take place, right? It's a little bit of there's an element of controlling your vendors in that too, right? Especially with and all the while you can on your phone have either rapid recon or recon velocity up on your phone, and you can be
It's
putting
just
in
one product now.
well, yeah, we're on the same team, right? So, but
Rapid
you know,
Recon Pro.
in Rapid Recon Pro, you can tag, right? You can PDR. This car is going to get PDR. This car is going to get paint. It's going to get touch up. It smells like a dog died in there, so we're going to deodorize it, or whatever. Chip in the windshield. You can put these tags on these cars in Rapid Recon Pro, so that when it's done with mechanical, whoever needs to manage the car, which is typically the internal advisor, your recon velocity champion, or rapid champion, right? Has to redirect this car through the vendor world. And then you already had vendors who already partake, possibly were present on a trade walk, and it's just easier from there on out. So you communicate early, get it loaded into the if you're using a recon tool. We love to talk about our tools because we are the tools, but we also know that there's some audience people out there that may not be on a tool. But it's we're the Jetsons now, right? The Flintstones. I was talking to a client who's used to use the Google Docs, right? I was a Google Doc king back in the day, and but at the end of the day, we have the technology now to actually take your trade walk information and put it on steroids. It's built into the car. It's tagged in there, and nothing gets lost in translation. And communicate now to save time later, right? And it's almost like slow down to speed up. That's a really common sales thing. Slow down. Trade walk is worth it because you're involving your teams, both sides of the fence. Get service fixed ops guys in there so that they know what the plan for the car is. Your salespeople know what the plan for the car is, but they're also involved. You're probably got your, making sure we're number one price in the market. We go up 500 miles and see what this exact car, or, same mileage, same make mileage is priced. So they're going over the pricing information. Get your salespeople involved in that conversation as well, right? And then and it's not a bad thing for the service side people to hear too. It's a there's a science to it, and just getting everybody involved empowers them, gives them ownership in the process, and it's
Yeah,
it's more than just a piece of metal that you're going to be selling later, right?
I think this really demonstrates a principle, because if you see it at work in a dealership, you know, it's a really marvelous thing, really, just to see all those people involved, especially when it's a regular thing. Some of the dealerships I've interacted with that have trade walks, you can see the salespeople know what to expect, they know what to look for, they know what the used car manager is looking for, and they know how to identify what the vehicle's needs are. And it's a very quick process, but there's a lot of camaraderie that's built in that moment. And what I've said in the past is that recon is a rare opportunity. Reconditioning in general is a rare opportunity for dealers to get different departments working together and get people working together that often don't have that much interaction with each other outside of what are usually kind of not necessarily abrasive, but almost like what's the word, adversarial almost in some ways. But when you have with reconditioning, you have an opportunity for these folks to really work together on the same page. And I think you ought to, as much as possible, double down on those opportunities where you can, because it's very, very fruitful. I've seen it happen. I've seen the way that the sales team and the service department start shaking hands a lot more, such that the service advisors, are able to very confidently structure a normal oil change into maybe a trade conversation. So that's the sort of culture you want to build in your dealership, where every department is shaking hands with the other and no one's looking sideways. And in order to do that, you have to identify those opportunities where you can get people to work together, and you got to double down on that. and the trade
Mm,
walk is a great opportunity to do that.
yep. You're all standing in the same spot in the parking lot, and you're on. It's kind of
Looking
you're on
at
the
the
same
same
team,
things, learning the
right?
same information, following through
Love
on
it.
the same sort of commitment, being there at 9 a.m. in the morning before any of your other obligations. It's
Hmm.
awesome because all those people have somewhere else to be and other things to do, but for one moment they're all there together, looking at the same thing, evaluating the same thing, and they're following through on their culture. And
Yeah.
that's why it's so, so valuable to have something like this. It's an opportunity not only for, like we've said, for the sales team to learn and the service team to learn and the cars to get the care that they need, but also for everyone to learn how to be a better team member.
And that's the hardest part. Everybody, we could sit here and talk and say, yeah, it's important. Yeah, we should do a trade walk. But think about what you really got to do. You got to pull the sales team out there. You got to pull the used car team. Everybody really has to. That I think is the challenge. I think people think it's important, but it's like herding cats, especially
Mm,
sales, right? Herding cats to get out there, but it's such a important. If you can't pull off a good trade walk, at least have an intake process of some sort by some people on the team, whether you gather a vendor. I talked to a lot of dealerships quite a bit that it's, like the used car, the internal advisor will walk the car and just kind of earmark it. But um, I think when it's a decision made by the collective group, it's much better and gives them ownership. But at
yeah,
least have a process if you can't herd cats.
yeah.
At least have something somewhere where you're establishing, "Hey, this is gonna be the plan for the car."
Well, I think we've given a lot of good reasons, Bobby, as to why it's valuable to try and herd those cats. And really, it's a commitment that leaders have to make. It's not really about the cats. It's not about
Yep.
the individuals involved. It's about standing up from your desk, going over to someone else's desk, and saying, "Hey, you need to come on the trade walk." And then, you do that 2 or 3 times, the guy you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to
Mhm.
keep following through. The people see that you're committed to it, the people see that you're committed to following through and that you're gonna come and get them if they don't show up, well,
Yeah.
then they're gonna
Yeah.
start coming out on
Yep.
their own. But it's really about those first 2 or 3 days where you have to do it,
Mhm.
and it doesn't have to be every day you're doing these thorough trade walks, you could do it, ostensibly you'd want to do them every day, but you don't have to do them every day, but you
Mhm.
could you could do them on a biweekly cadence and still sort of accomplish the same thing. But I would make sure that you always bring out, as many people as you can, that no one gets excluded from this or thinks that they're too good to go out on the trade walk.
Yep.
So just make sure if you do set up a cadence that you're bringing everybody out and you don't let people exclude themselves.
And the trade walk in some cases it's only 15 minutes. It's less than 30
It's
minutes in most
it's
cases,
never
right?
gonna
Especially
be really
if it's a
crazy.
Tuesday. I promise you.
Sometimes it'll be big.
The biggest trade walk I've ever seen was Lone Star Chevrolet in Texas. Okay. Johnny Smith was the general manager's name because that's how he introduced himself. And in fact, it was me and Brandon Edelman, one of our other team members, were out there. And
Um,
we were boots on the ground installing, our software. We couldn't believe it. I mean, that store was so busy. Josh, they had probably close to 30 cars lined up, and it was like a Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Thursday.
I bet you they
I'm
were
like,
quick.
holy crap. And it was an army of people out there that did that. I can't remember if they were a Sonic story. I know I think Sonic might require trade walks, but
Yeah,
hugely important because at the end
yes,
of the
they
day,
do,
you
yeah.
really don't want to have to apologize for your cars. You know, most dealerships want their cars standing tall. You don't want to over recondition, right? You don't want to put, you don't want to, it's like putting an in-ground swimming pool at your campsite, or whatever, and you're not going to resell it. You spend 50 grand on your pool, you might not get 50 grand out of it, right? But just the little things that give it an extra set of eyes, they say, or you might be able to justify why you might be holding strong, 9500% priced in the market for this car, depending on what it is. So that's super important.
Yeah, I think overall, Shelley, let's make sure we move the poll on to that last question. I don't know if we had the poll for our audience members, but uh, if you guys see, we're interested in knowing what your next topic you'd like us to cover is. We've gone through quite a few topics related to recon over the years, and as you can see, we're starting to return to topics just to sort of reemphasize them. I think we've actually done a great job here today. I think this is a much better presentation overall than the first
Mm.
time we talked about the trade walk. But um, yeah, we've got the perfect recon team. That's our answer so far.
Oh, that could be a
Um,
good one.
oh, now we got process-based leadership. We got a 50-50. Someone's got to break the tie here, y'all. But back on the topic, uh, Bobby, what would you say? What is the main benefit to bringing the sales team, like how would you educate a fresh sales team member about the recon process? What would you tell them? How do they relate that to their customers in a productive way?
I think most dealerships want to express, especially the ones that want to show their work, right? Because it's a transparent, the climate and culture of the sales climate, your customers. Okay. It's not like 15, 20 years ago where you're going to throw an extra 3 or 4 grand into the price of a car, hoping that the customer is just going to be like, yeah, I'll buy it. Nobody's really, those days are gone. That ship has sailed. I got all the information known to mankind in the palm of my hand. It's called my cell phone. And I already know what that car is priced or what a fair price is for that car before I ever set foot on your lot. You can just assume that 90%, at least 80 to 90% of your customers that stumble onto your parking lot have already researched the car they're looking for online, right? So you better be good at what you're doing to your cars. And so with a new sales member, let's say, reconditioning is an important thing. We want to be synonymous with our car standing tall. And that's why it really should be a group effort when you're doing these trade walks. Go over the cars and get your salespeople involved as a part of the decision making process. They're walking around their car, they're pointing out the scratches on the bumper, they're pointing out this, they're pointing out that. Now your salespeople have a little more respect of what goes into making sure that these cars are standing tall. Right. And then the service side, there could be less questions. Who gets bombarded in the dealership for all these salespeople asking, about these cars going through the process, right? It's that internal advisor or the recon team, right? Well, maybe that could subside a little bit if they already kind of know what's going on with these cars. And
I've
then
had.
have
Oh, go
go ahead.
ahead, Bob. I was
I
just
was
gonna
going to
say.
say having a top
Go ahead.
of, I'm talking, we're having a top of the head awareness of what's coming in. There are salespeople in some dealerships that don't dare go to the desk and ask, "Hey, do we have, what do we have coming in?" You're going to get shot because you didn't walk your lot. You didn't know your inventory. Lot walks. That's another thing. This is like the first lot walk. It's kind of like a lot walk. You don't have to go very far. You got the trade walk and all the cars that are kind of staged that have been, getting ready to go through the process, right? Having a top of head awareness of what's coming in is a huge tool. Then you can pitch to your customer, hey, how would you can buy it before you can buy it. Hey, I know you came in last week and we could, but hey, I just took in this 2012 Camry. It's a little bit older, but it's got low mileage. Turns out an old lady drove it and decided that she's too old to drive anymore and traded it in. Is this something you'd be interested in looking at? And the only way I would know that, because I promise you, it's still sitting in ready to be, it might be up on the shop, might be in the shop up on a lift right now. Hey, it's going through the shop right now. Is this something, maybe in a couple, when it's done going through the process, you can come drive it, right? You really get the jump on certain things. If you get a full blown effective trade walk as a part of your culture and as part of your process.
Yeah, and I would say just an addendum to that is the giving your salespeople access to your tools. So not so much to move things around, obviously, but to look just to see what's happening, what's in the process, where a car is at, whether or not it's going to be viable or available for a customer to see at this point or test drive at this point. And to be able to answer that question definitively, the first time a customer asks is a great boon to your dealership. They can say, "Hey, can I come and test drive it today?" And I can say definitively yes or no to that answer to that question, and I don't just lure them into the dealership no matter
Because
what.
we know damn well you did a pretty quick job of getting it on the internet for sale, right?
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
of
like your
course.
question in there, Josh. Who does detail on photos ahead of, as a first part of the recon? That's for getting it online. You're going to get them online fast. Wow, it might be a good idea that your salespeople already have a kind of a top of head awareness of these cars as they come in,
Yeah,
which again saves
100%.
time.
Yeah, and as like, that goes hand in hand what I'm saying with getting insight into the process, because the sales like, if you're merchandising the cars very quickly, then customers are aware of them quickly. They're gonna have
Mhm.
questions quickly, and you wanna have your first people who are you want your first line of contact to have as much information for that customer as possible,
Yeah.
especially the stuff like the obvious stuff. Is it available for a test drive? What is the conditioner? What have you done so far? I I can I see the car?
Customers
The
are just getting smarter. They
Yeah,
are.
like, the more you can be transparent and provide to them upfront, the more likely it is that they're actually gonna show up.
Mhm.
So just make sure that your conversations with BDC, with salespeople, those first line internet sales, give them access to the tools that you have to the extent that they can see what's happening, so that they can
Mhm.
have that information for the customer. And that just goes hand in hand with all of what we've been saying about the benefits of transparency. Because once again, customers are not they don't live in a fantasy world. They know what they're doing
Some do.
when they go out to buy a car. Well
Some
well,
still
yeah,
do.
certainly,
I'm
but
kidding,
but but they're not gonna
but I'm
live
not.
in your fantasy world. Everybody lives in a fantasy world, but they're not gonna live in the one that
Good point.
the dealers would love them to the most.
Good point. But hey,
Right?
bring back the trade walk. That's how we're going to close this thing out. Just bring it back, guys. Do something. Do something with kind of pre-communicating at best.
Mhm.
Pre-communicate for the purpose of the what it takes to get through mechanical, through the shop and through the recon process. But then why not take the opportunity to communicate to the sales side so that everybody in the place knows what the hell's going on with this used car inventory that you're taking in, right? Or hey, this is going to wholesale. Wait, I actually have a customer looking for the $5,000 car, and this might work. Can we at least get it through safety? Holy crap! You had better luck selling it to depending on how you took it in. But yeah, I'd rather gain a customer and sending those dealerships that work the wholesale market. Oh, send a whole because they're just turning and burning. You're not in. You're not creating a relationship with the customer if you send it to wholesale. You might have a buyer for the next 10 years if you do well with whoever you sold it to, right? So that's another side of, just, that just came to thought because
Yeah, you're leveraging your investment that you've already made. So
you'd
all this
rather sell it from your lot than, right? So,
yeah,
all right,
but I
guys, we're at time. Josh, I think we went 2 minutes over. Anything else
yeah,
we
we could
good?
go on and on and on, but,
We
I think
appreciate the poll of everybody who's leaning on our next topic here for us there.
yeah, so we can talk about process-based leadership. That'll be a great conversation to have, I think. And of course,
Yep.
this is all we haven't had many participants in a long while, Bobby, but I don't know what it is. Maybe the interface isn't approachable enough, but if at any time, guys, look up at that top banner, you'll see an option to raise your hand. So if you ever wanted to take part in this conversation, talk a little bit about what your own experience on the ground is like, we'd love to hear from you about in the next one.
Yes,
Uh,
we think we know everything, but we don't. So
we hear a
there's a,
lot of stuff.
we're learning every day. So we want to hear from the field as much as we want to talk. So guys, it would be great
Yeah,
if we can get some
100%.
participation. We want to hear your feedback and input on this. So and what other
Yeah.
people are doing. So
Yeah. This is meant not only, as a resource or a place for us, but just a resource for our customers as well.
yeah. So do we got?
But
We got next month coming up, the month of May. Boom, 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 boom. It looks like it would be May 28th, towards the end of the month.
21st, right? So 3rd Thursday of every month.
Yeah.
7th is
Oh,
the
the
first
third. You
Thursday.
are 21st of May will be the next podcast.
May
So
21st. That'll be a good day. I think it's just a few days short of like, sort of last week rush. So I think everyone should
yeah,
have some
that'll
good
be a good
attendance.
time. Good
Yeah.
deal.
But thanks everybody for joining us. Look forward to seeing you on episode 18.
All right, guys. Thank you. Have a great one.
Bye bye.